when you think about huge tech companies, right? Or even any industry for that matter, how do they decide what to build next? And you've seen all kinds of like crazy stuff happen. I remember Amazon Fire Phone, how that became a complete disaster. The whole thing behind that is called strategy, right? How to do what is next. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Chima, a tech strategist who's been in the industry for more than 10 years and has worked across many different industries from e-commerce to health tech, consulting, gaming, and fintech, and can share a lot of very useful insight for someone trying to build out their career today in this specific tech field and what those opportunities are. Without more fluff or talk, welcome to the show, Chima.
Thank you so much, Joel. Happy to be here. Happy to be here. Thank you. Great to be
So,
here.
so one of the first questions I always like to ask my guests when they join is, why did you decide to pursue a career in tech?
I think for me, right, it was how dynamic tech is. Like things move at faster than the speed of light, even, right? So things move super fast. And I just knew that I wanted to be a part of that, that pace of innovation, learning, growth, right? I knew that just being in that type of industry would automatically rub off on me, and I would also like just start thinking in that way and start moving that fast as well, right? So for me it was just that hunger to be part of something that was moving super fast, and that desire to jump in at that very early stage, and see where that leads really.
But looking at kind of like how you got started out, you didn't really start fully in tech. You started in consulting and kind of like pivoted. Tell me about what it was like getting your very first job.
Great question. I think so for me, starting out in consulting was very intentional actually, right? Because just fresh out of university, college, right? You're like, so what do I do? And you hear, so I mean, the things you hear mostly, especially back in Nigeria, right? So banks, but then I knew that I wanted to do something different, right? I wanted to like learn how to think the right way, how to solve complex problems, right? And the best place to do that is in consulting, you know. So getting that foundation right was the best thing I could have done for myself, right? And after about about 4 years, I knew that okay, look, I've gotten that foundation right, and I need to now take it to the next level. But I was tired of advising. I wanted to get my hands dirty, I wanted to, start actually doing the things I was telling people to do.
Hmm.
So it was like, so where's the best place for me to do that? So back to my first response was like, look, tech looks fantastic right now. E-commerce was about to, lift off back then in Nigeria. So that look, this is a very, very brilliant space. And I feel like the skills that I bring to the table, taking a very messy problem, thinking through it, solving it, executing, tracking progress, so like sounds like a very, very good fit for the skills I was bringing at the time. So for me, it was a very, very easy decision then.
One of the funny things that people like to joke about consulting is that it's all about making fancy pitch decks. Is it that?
Nope. No, 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 no. It's far from it. Like that's the farthest thing from the truth. I think it's really how to think, asking questions, being very curious, asking questions, and then trying to understand the root cause of a problem,
Mm.
and then putting some structure into how you then solve that problem, and then you execute. So slides is just a very tiny piece of it. Like Dex is a very small piece of it. That's like, how you communicate. And the truth is, it could be in a doc as well, right? Like a one pager you write, but it's just making sure that you're structured. So slides just, I mean, it's a nice way to present your ideas, but that's not the crux of it. Because guess what? If you're saying rubbish on a slide, you'll be called out now. So you'll be called out. So that's it. That's it.
So it's interesting that you say that about just that whole process of thinking, ideating, coming up with ideas. But break it down to even the most basic level, because again, for context, like the audience that mostly listens to this are people who are outside looking in. So I might understand what you mean, but to someone who hasn't worked in tech, what does that look like? And maybe even a better way to put it is like, what is like a typical or a very simple problem that might look simple, but that might need some strategic thought processes to actually get to the right answer?
It's a very great question. So it could be, for example, let's say sales in, I mean, so we launched this new product, right? And it's not doing as well as we thought it would, you know. Um, what do you do in that case, right? Because so it's brought to your table, right? So this is a problem, right? We launched this fantastic fintech product and it's not working, customers are not using it as we thought they would, the adoption is very, very low, right? So what do you do? The first thing you want to do is, let's maybe, for example, let's reduce the price of what we're doing. Like that's what I mean. People also want to like
Most
reduce
people
the
would do, or
price,
like let's increase marketing.
increase marketing. Let's start to do more advertisements. But stepping back and like look, so what could be the potential problems? I mean, root causes of this problem, right? So you break it down, right? So you launched a new product, right? First thing you could think about is who is the target market,
Hmm.
right? Who is the target market of that product, right? Are they using it? How much are they using it? And they using it? So of those that are using it, what are they saying, right? Are they not using it? Like, so what's that traction, right?
Hmm.
That's one aspect, right? Target market. Second thing is the product itself, right?
Hmm.
What's like the functionalities? Is it easy to use, right?
Hmm.
Test it out with a few people, understand to those that are actually using it, why do they like it? Those who have seen it and are not using it, why and they using it, right?
Hmm.
The third thing is market, right? Where are you selling? Where did you launch this new product
Hmm.
into,
Hmm.
right? Is that the right market? Is that the right audience for you to actually go after,
Hmm.
right? So looking at all these different things, right? All the different angles, right, would help you see what the real problem actually is. It might be that it is the interface, right? The user interface of that beautiful app is not the right fit for your market, right?
Hmm.
But you wouldn't know if you don't ask questions. You wouldn't know if you don't break
Hmm.
it down a bit, if you don't think through the potential causes, structure it, list everything out, ask the right questions. You wouldn't know what that problem is if you don't do that initial thinking, right? So
Hmm.
when you've not understood what the problem is, you can then think through what the potential solutions are,
Hmm.
right? So you can think, for example, so do we scrap the old app and create a new one,
Hmm.
right? Do we tweak the functionality a bit and just move X to this spot and change a few things, right?
Hmm.
Or do we even just switch to like a different provider, right? And how you decide is, for example, you consider like various criteria, right? For example, like cost, right? Time it will take to execute. Which of these potential solutions will have the most impact at the time?
Hmm.
So use all that criteria to then decide on the best course, on the right course of action, some that thing from point A to point B.
Hmm.
So you've seen that like it's not just, oh, this is the problem and then we jump into it. No.
Hmm.
Think through what
It's
are the
taking a
potential
systemic
causes.
approach. Hmm.
Exactly. I think that type of thinking will always help you no matter where you are, and yeah.
And you know what? One thing that kind of like spoke to me when you're talking about it is that what you're describing sounds like a very human skill that we all have at a basic level. Because I even imagine like, a rapper, for example, you want to launch a new, let's say, mixtape or a single. You're not gonna drop that song the same day that Kendrick and Drake are dropping that song, because even if the target audience is there, they might be too engaged and the noise might be too much for them to even listen to your joint, right?
Yeah.
So you definitely want to drop your stuff as far away from that as possible. But even like your entire rollout strategy, right? Like how do people consume this type of stuff? What is it that they're looking for? And how do you get all of this stuff in? I think that, so going back to like how this is like usual for most people, imagine that I didn't have the opportunity to work at a consulting firm like you did. How are some ways that I can still build this muscle? And are there resources out there that I can use to become a better, strategy person?
Oh, of course, there are tons of books, like there are tons of stuff. In fact, the thing is, I don't in today's world, right? Like where we are today, right? You actually don't even need to work in consulting to have the skills that you need to, because there's so much resource out there for you to leverage to get what you need,
Mm,
and it's one, for example, they're like there's so many platforms that you can get these things from, right? YouTube is a good example, right? You just put in there like, how can I think in a more structured way, right? You see tons of things, tons of videos that you can watch, you can leverage, books that have been written about this topic, lots of books, even working, like even getting that background in consulting is not even enough. You still have to like go like deeper into it, right? So that curiosity is still needed. You just like go deeper, so like still get more, like learn about it, understand it, test yourself, practice. I think that's also one key thing. Like so, practicing what you watch on a YouTube video, for example,
mm,
practicing, testing it out with even with, and it also applies to like things you face in your day to day as well,
mm.
right? So, for example, um do I get myself this nice pair of shoes, right? So it's like again, it's like so thinking through it, right? So
But knowing that if I do that, I might not be able to make rent at the end of the month.
exactly.
So it's like, do I chill on these shoes right
Exactly.
now, or
So
do I YOLO?
so it's you start to practice and apply that thinking into everything else that you do, rather than just jumping first into executing. No, 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 no. Chill. Think about it first. Break it down a bit, and then yeah. So you can learn from like, I mean, every like there are tons of videos. A little bit of research, and then practicing with your day to day, which is helping make it a habit eventually.
Mm. And it's interesting because, like, working on product or even solution engineering, like, you see a lot of strategy work in there, right? Like, determining stuff, even in program management, right? Like, because in there, like, you have to think kind of like 30,000 feet, right? It's not just like in there, like the tactical stuff, but rising that level above and trying to think, see, as I don't know what the saying is, but I think it's kind of like see the forest from the trees or something like that. So, what are the different opportunities? And you've not even dropped the book. So, what are some books that have helped you personally? That's one. And then two, what are the different opportunities behind strategy and op roles that strategy itself as a skill can be very useful?
Great questions. So the first one, so two books I'd say. So one is Pyramid Principle by Barbara Minto. That's like the Bible of like structured thinking and writing, structured thinking and communication. That's one. Second is Bulletproof Problem Solving by Bulletproof Problem Solving by Robert McLean and Charles Conn. That's the second one. So those two books, fantastic. Um, yeah, I think those two books are really, really good.
Sorry, what was the second one again?
Bulletproof
Bullet,
Problem Solving
bulletproof.
by Robert McLean and Charles Conn.
Hmm. Okay, and then
Like
what?
I still even go back. Like I still reference them sometimes just to like refresh. So to tell you how constant
How good it
learning.
is.
Exactly.
And so as a strategy professional, right? And I still even want to get to the ops part. Is like, what is the difference between strategy and ops? Maybe that's even a good next one.
So the first part is the thinking through, right? Strategy. So what are we going to do? What are we not going to do? Right. So deciding what you do versus what you won't do. and before you do that, obviously you do that whole analysis, what's going to be the return on investment. So all of that thinking, all of that like brainstorming, structuring, and then come up with the conclusion and a recommendation, right? So that's the first part. So we have that on paper. So this is what we will do, and this is what we won't do. When you have decided, now the second part is, so how do we execute on this? That's where the ops part comes into play, right? How do we then bring this thing that we said we would do to life, right? For example, you said you would want to grow revenue in a particular market, and you've seen that for you to do that, you need to launch a new product or introduce a new feature, right? So you said, okay, fine, that's the right thing to do. Great. So now how do we bring that thing to life? How do we execute on it? Right. So now this is when you get into like the weeds and the detail of that problem, right? So like, for example, start thinking through what are the timelines, what are the tactical steps that we need to take, right? For example, who needs to do what? Who needs to build what by when, right? How do we know when this is completed? Who are the stakeholders that we need to collaborate with to get this done,
So
right?
if we
Once
go
that's
back to my launching, let's use the launching an album or launching a single example.
yeah,
What would that look like?
launching an album. So it's first of all, so you have this great piece of work, right? Body of work done. It's fantastic, right? So the first thing is start thinking this. So how are we going to launch this product, right? We're going to do like an like a
Album listening party.
listening party, or we're just going to go straight into the retail stores, or just going to do it strictly online, no offline, presence, no offline advertisement, nothing, only online on YouTube, Apple Music, all of that, right? So it's like, so where are we going to do that rollout on,
Mm,
or through what platform, right? And then
mm.
who do we need to help us do that,
In
right? So
every
do
key
we have,
position. Mm,
exactly, so can we do it by ourselves, right? If not, who do we need to involve? So you call them, right? How much will this cost? Budgets, all of that, timelines, chasing people, so like bringing that thing to life. And even after all of this is done, as the next step is now tracking. So like, did this actually work?
right.
And
That guy said he could get us 1 million streams in the first day. Did we get 1 million streams?
so asking this question, so what, so like so kind of that postmortem after everything is done, to see what worked and what didn't work, so that the next time you do this, you take those learnings, right, and you bring them back into play. So
Mm,
that's the operations part, and I feel like doing both is so important, because it's very easy to have this very brilliant idea on paper and say, oh yeah, this is my strategy, and I think this would help to take us from
point A to point
from
B.
A to point B. But the truth is, you won't know, right? Or like, you won't get that fulfillment until you actually like execute that thing. You
Mm,
know, it's very different to write stuff, and it's really nice on a slide, like you said, but to bring it to life, like that is where the real, the real
magic is.
meat is. Yeah.
Mm, good. Good. Okay, so then you made the pivot into tech, right? Tell me about what that journey is like, and what advice would you give anyone trying to go into tech in terms of like how to prepare, how you prepared for your first opportunity in tech?
It's a great question. So my first role in tech was in an e-commerce company, and I was a business analyst, right? So basically, I worked with so we had this online marketplace, and we sold, like, there were like tons of like various products across different categories. So my role was working with the different category heads to understand how we could grow GMV, so gross merchandise value and volume, right? How could we grow our products? How could we increase visits to our site and all of that fun stuff? So it was looking at a lot of numbers, So being very comfortable looking at numbers, trying to make sense of numbers, being very comfortable speaking to people, right, that are the experts, in their fields. And so and that's where stakeholder management comes in, right? So you have to be able to like work really well with people because they know their field, but what you are bringing, right, is that
External
perspective.
perspective.
Exactly,
Mm,
right? How do we, think through this from a different perspective? Have we tried this? Have we tried that? So it's like, and then making them feel very comfortable with working with you to execute that thing, right? So very, very fast paced. It was working with a lot of numbers, right? A lot of data at the time, even more than I did when I was in consulting. And I think it was a very it was a good learning opportunity for me, right? Because obviously you start seeing things from a different perspective. Before you are on the outside, now you're on the inside, working with a team that's actually building or trying to grow that thing from 1 to 10, from 1 to 100. So I'd say to your second question around like starting or like what do you do or like, how do you get into it, right? I think that was it, right?
mm,
So I think it's figuring out like what do you want to do first of all. Like if you've realized that, if you've understood that it's tech, right? So what part of tech interests you, right? It's very broad, the different aspects. And if it is this part, so program management, strategy, and operations, right? So it's these things that we've been discussing so far, right? So being able to
mm.
understand how to solve very difficult problems, work well with people, you know, um, and then being comfortable with ambiguity as well, because you'll face a lot of problems where things are very ambiguous. There's no clear path forward, but being very comfortable with tailoring your, I mean, tailoring your way through that, and putting some structure to then find a solution. So,
Okay, so um, given that given that experience or thinking back to this, are there any like boot camps or things that could have helped you think about it, like someone who, let's say you didn't have a college degree, right? How would you have made that jump to still get to where you are, to help anyone who probably is in that situation?
I think I'd say finding an opportunity to do an apprenticeship,
Mm,
right? So if you don't, I mean, if you can't go to college, right? So look for that chance to do an apprenticeship, right? Even if it's work, I mean, so working for free if you have to,
mm,
right? For that period. Because the truth is that you can do these things, you can learn how to do these things by actually doing them, right? And the best way to do that is from a real life situation in a company, right? So being an apprentice, right, in a tech company, or I mean, and it doesn't have to be like a big one. It could be a very small startup, right? So you go in there and find that chance to be an apprentice, right, in that field that you want to grow in. I feel like that's a very good and quick way, not quick, but like an easier route if you don't go through the whole college route and all that. Like you get in very early, understand what it is that you want to do, and then you find that approach to find that way or that route to become an apprentice, and then you walk through that and you walk your way up. I've seen people who have done that and they've been apprentices at tech companies and then they've gone on to build a very strong career through that route. I feel like that's a very good way to do it, really.
So what's the difference between like the different industries that you worked in, and what lesson did you take from each, e-commerce, gaming, tech, consulting, etc.?
So consulting, I think I've already covered that extensively. E-commerce is like it's extreme. So tech as a whole is very competitive, right? But I'd say e-commerce is even more brutal in the sense that, for example, you have this item on your site and selling it at $10, right? The next day or the next fact the next second you look at the difference and it's like being offered for like half the price, you know. So it's very aggressive, you know. The competition is very aggressive, very cutthroat. So the learning there was finding a way to really keep, I mean, really like retain your customers, right? So that
Mm,
customer retention approach has to be very creative, you know,
mm,
to go be, so you don't get into that price war with your competitors and just like sinks you, and you know that's just a different story altogether. Gaming, gaming is great, right? Because I think in gaming there's a huge need for there's, there's a huge need for that, for your product to be fantastic, right? So the product development, the product has to be almost perfect, right? To keep or to retain your customers. So I think that was the sector where I worked in, where I think I got more involved with products, right? So trying to figure out like what do we need to do to make this as easy for customers, for our customers to stay, right? First of all, to join and then to stay, right? How do we need to position the different buttons? You know, how do we need to think through the rewards schemes for these? So really thinking through that, basically putting yourself in the mind of a customer, right? And also even speaking to customers before you even roll things out. So really that whole design thinking approach, right? So meeting with customers, thinking through. So this is how we want to, you know, position this product or this app or this game, right? What do you think? What's your feedback, right? So how do you think? And then using that to then build that product into stuff that they would want to, one, use, and two, keep using,
mm,
right? So I think that was the key thing for me while in gaming. And in fintech, I think fintech is very exciting. Was very exciting because it was moving very quickly, right?
mm,
The company where I worked at, we started out as um, basically a solar home system where basically folks could take like a solar home system product on loan and then pay for it over a period,
mm.
right? And that evolved into a mobile phone where they would, you know, get that phone and they'll pay for it, pay as you go. So when you don't pay, the phone locks, you know, and then yeah, like, and then that then moved into then providing, you know, loans, uh, customer loans, you know. So that evolution, and you find that in a lot of fintechs as well, right? The evolution is very quick, you know, and you're always evolving so you can meet the needs of customers at different times, right?
You
At different
know,
points in times.
the craziest thing that I've heard so far is that I thought the company was actually, when I saw fintech, I thought the company was more of an energy company. So I'm really surprised that that they that
So
they're a
that's the
fintech
thing.
company.
Exactly. So it actually started out as an energy company, right? Or like, you know, an energy mixed with energy plus financial, like means
Because
fintech, right?
financing, like if you think about even in the US or Apple, they all have some sort of financing behind it.
Exactly.
But to see that that became the entire business model was just so interesting to me.
Like the evolution, and I was right there when that evolution happened, and it was beautiful to see because it just look. I mean, it just made perfect sense, right? At the time it was like, it was a bit like, why are we doing this, you know, like does this make sense? But you could see, I mean, right now, like in fact, like it's one of the fastest growing companies in Africa, right? And doing really well, you know. So that pivot was amazing, and it was well executed, and it was needed, you know. It was very much needed, you know, because now we've gone from just solar home systems to now being like, you know, mobile phones,
Mm.
and then even loans, you know. So it's even now gone beyond that, even now to like to even bikes, right? So
Oh
financing
wow.
those as well. So it's
So
really
all
big
sorts of
now.
like consumer financing is what it kind of like became from just
Exactly.
being an energy company.
Yeah.
That's And I think that comes to a very interesting point, right? That I think is useful in strategy, but it's useful also in tech careers, right? Like making change. I think even in your story, like anybody who's been following it has seen that change, right? To go from a mindset of I want to get into consulting because I want to do something different, then spotting opportunity as a result of potentially being in consulting and see how the landscape is changing, and then pursuing that opportunity, and then going from that to gaming, going from gaming to solar, and within to energy, and within energy becoming fintech. So how important it is that if I'm starting today to first of all embrace a mindset of constant change, and what does that look like for someone who's coming in?
I think it's so important. I feel like that's the first thing you have to prepare your mind for and be comfortable with. It's one, being very comfortable with change, and two is having a growth mindset,
Mm,
right? Seeing everything as an opportunity to learn and to grow, right?
mm,
Because you never know where that new adventure will take you, right? You never know what you
mm,
will learn from it, you know.
mm,
So just, I think that's the first thing to do, especially in tech, like you said.
mm.
Um, a few years ago, who knew that the world would not be all about AI, right? And
Yep.
now, like, if you're not willing to embrace it,
Mm,
you will get left behind.
mm,
I'm not saying depend solely on AI for everything you do, but embrace that the fact that you have to use AI to improve or speed up your productivity, right? That's where we
mm,
are now, and it's that change, is that being very comfortable with things will always change, and there's a learning opportunity in every single thing,
mm,
right? And like it's everywhere, in my story, right? So I've gone from doing consulting to working in, like, to your point, e-commerce, gaming, fintech, even a health tech company at a time, now a big tech. So it's in all those experiences, I've learned different things that are still helping me today,
mm,
right? But if I had said in the beginning that, oh, look, I won't do this, right, I will not go into this industry or this sector, right,
mm.
that have been my loss, right? So I feel like it's very crucial to have that open mindset, have that growth mindset, that, like, you can always learn from anything, from any experience, right? Yeah, taking it from there, really.
So we do have a lot of interesting comments. I'm gonna take the first one. So Jameen says hi, and then great convo, and then was asking, wondering when you'll start playing Call of Duty. Well, I don't play Call of Duty on this channel, but I guess Chima can show you how to build it. And then Mintrade says, I like gooning to AI. AI is moving too fast for me to go for it. And I like that last bit because it was going to be the next thing I was going to talk about. So even within like many companies, both technology companies and non-tech companies, one of the things that I'm seeing is just this desire to get into AI, even if there's no clear like cut out strategy. What is the basic level that someone can do to get into AI, and maybe like the next level from that?
um Now, so is this question from the perspective of the individual or the company?
Oh, the person.
The individual. I think, look, like, the barrier to entry is so low. It's so low. I think it's so easy for, like, the first thing, and I think the most important part, is learning how to write great prompts. Right? So prompts engineering. I mean, it sounds big, prompts engineering, but it's just really writing very clear, simple prompts, right? So you want to say, okay, I want to create this marketing brief to sell a pair of new running shoes, right? And you say, oh, help me create this. No, 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 no. So, like, so you step back and say, look, so you create a persona, right? So I am an industry leading marketing expert
Mm,
who has done remarkable things in the marketing space. I have just launched this new product that I want to sell XYZ units in XYZ months. I'm very creative, so giving it that, fitting it with that persona, right? Who do you
mm,
want it to be, right?
mm,
Before you then even write out the task,
mm,
right? So being that very detailed,
mm,
you know, and putting that in a chatbot, sorry, and then Gemini, for example, right? What you will get is 10 times better than what you'd have gotten if you just said, "Oh, help me create this marketing brief to sell this new pair of running shoes," right?
mm,
So giving it a persona, context.
mm,
So is this a new product? Has it been, launched before? Who do you want to sell it to? Um, how quick do you want to sell it? So that more detail,
mm.
is what you. So go back to the question is how. So it's learning how to write the best prompts. Will give you the best results. I
Results.
think
Yep.
that's like the most basic thing, or the most basic skill, that's required of everyone these days, I think.
And I think you hit it right on the head because I think the biggest challenge that I've seen specifically is that people don't even know how to align what they want with the outcomes that they're trying to get out of it, right? Because in this case, sometimes what that means is, are you doing enough, or do you even have a clear thought process about
Hmm.
where you want to go? So, for example, like given the persona that I was talking about, like if I'm new today, for example, and I want to get into tech, so I could say something like, I work in a factory, I drive Uber, I have a GED, right? I see, in fact, you can
Yes.
be as clear and as vulnerable as you want to be.
Yes.
I've watched, Simone Bies say she got government security clearance and she works in cybersecurity,
Yes.
but I'm not even sure if cybersecurity is right for me. Here are maybe things that I like to do. I like to play Call of Duty.
Yes.
Hang out with people. I once wrote my own MySpace page, and I think I had to do some coding in there, and I
Hmm.
enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Or you know what? I hated that period of my life where I had to figure that out. I think what my friends tell me I'm great at is XYZ. Can you help me figure some roles that I could do that could be helpful for me? And then it spits out 5 roles and
Yes.
says product manager, tech strategist, ops lead, this and that. And
Exactly.
then you don't even have to stop there, right? You could
No.
say, okay, all of this is good. Can you explain to me how each of these work? Help me find a video that breaks this down if you don't even want to
Yep.
go over to Google yourself.
Yes.
And just by engaging it, one, you're understanding the thought process. And then right there, you could say, like, if you then want to go maybe more AI specific after you figured out what you need to for this roles, and say, I'm starting out from day one. Like this is zero for me. This is day zero for me.
Yep.
I want to get good enough in AI to understand the basics of it, how it's built, what the different terms are, like, what are LLMs, what is NLP,
Yeah.
what are RAGs, what is an MCP. Maybe you don't even know that.
Yeah.
But then guess what? You can say, what are the most important terms in AI for me to know around how it's built, maintained, how it works? Maybe even those are like two. But the goal is, what makes AI work? What makes AI AI? What is
Exactly.
behind your thing? And how do I
Exactly.
need to know it? So
Exactly.
even your ignorance, quote unquote, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but I mean like the things you don't know can become the thing that fuels this engine that gets you
Yep.
what you need to know.
100%. You're right. I think, and it's again, it's treating it as your thought partner, right? Like
Yep.
that very intelligent assistant that you
Yep.
have, free of charge,
Yep.
and you will just keep getting like the best results from it,
Yep.
Um, and it's to your point. So you create something like, okay, look, here's what I've created. You are, a 10 years or 20 years tenured, tech leader, I want you to review this and point out the weaknesses. How can I make this document stronger? How can I make my argument stronger? How can I make it even clearer, right?
Mm,
and you will see the quality of the feedback that you get from it, right? Trust
mm,
me, that document will be 10x better when you're done, than when you just had that first. So it's your it's your thought partner,
mm,
and I think that's the best way to take this and get the most of it, I believe.
mm. So we kind of like brushed on it on the last response, but I was watching a video where someone was talking about the acceptance rate to get into big tech and the acceptance rate to get into Harvard. So for Harvard, it's something like maybe 3.2%, which just means that for every 100 people who apply to get into Harvard, only three make it. So 100,000, 3,000.
Mm,
But for big tech, it's point something, right? It's not even 1%. It's like maybe 0.2 or something like that. So for every 100,000, it's 200. Maybe it's even worse than that. Talk to me about how many tries did it take? What was the interview process like? How difficult was it? How challenging was it to make that leap?
mm. How many tries? So I'd say I applied over, I think, over 8 times
Wow.
over the course of like uh 9 to 10 years. I think I applied over 8 times, right?
Mm,
Um, and yeah, and this was across like several like big tech companies, right? So eventually, I got to the final stage in one of the big tech companies, and I didn't get it. I was obviously very, very disappointed. You know, I'm like, no, I'm gonna, step back a bit, rest a bit, and go again.
how burnt were you?
I
Like
was extremely burnt because I had to, and that particular company like made me do like a
a case
case
study?
in 3 hours, right? So in
Three
three
hour
hours, yeah,
case.
3 hours, I had to complete that case. So it was, I mean, a spreadsheet, analyze the data, and create a deck. So I had to submit both the spreadsheet and the deck. And I got to final round, interviewed and everything, and then I didn't get it. Cool. And then different tech company, and then that one that applied to so many times. And then I eventually, I got it. So the stages, right? So the first one is just like role fit to see how if you actually have the skill set required to do that role.
Mm,
You know, so let's say the role requires you to um, move this big chair from here to here, right? Can you actually know how to, navigate your way across the room to move the chair from here to there, right? So that role fit, very crucial. Second was leadership.
mm,
So are you a good leader? Like you don't have to have a team to lead people, right? Every day in your day to day, you're actually like leading. It's how you show up in meetings, how you show up in like projects and everything, right? So
mm,
that part is very crucial. The next is how you think, right? So your cognitive ability, right? So if you're given a problem or a task, right, do you take a step back and pause for a minute to like think about it, break it down into bits, prioritize what to look at, test. So that thinking is what is tested in that stage, right? So you've been given a question to see how you approach problems, right? And you want to just dive into and say, well, that's the answer. How do you know that's the answer, right? So that's
mm,
what that stage is about. And then the last is more like culture fit, right? To understand
mm,
how much of how if you're a fit for the culture, right?
mm,
Because and that's very important because I mean you work with people every day, so you don't want to be that person in a room who's very difficult to work with or you're not, collaborative and everything, right? So those are the main stages, of the interview process. And it could last anywhere from between two 2 to 6 months, right? Depending. So yeah, that's it. I think again, is it difficult? Yes. Is it doable? Of course, yes. right? But I think it's that patience because you won't. I don't know. Maybe there are people who've done it who've applied once and then gotten it straight up, right? They should please let me know what they did. But it will take time. It will
It's a
take time, and
process.
exactly, and that's fine, right? Because as you keep going, you are learning from every trial, right? And obviously you do things differently the next time and you keep on going. But it can be very discouraging. I understand that, but yeah, I think you just keep on pushing and then to eventually come through.
Got a question saying, how much can I make by becoming a strategy and ops manager in big tech?
That's a good question. And I mean, I don't. It's very relative, right? Depending on your level, location. So I think that's all I can say on that one.
But I guess what I could probably share is like, especially here in the US, you can expect to make like six figures in most of those roles. Of course, if you're very, very new, it might be a little below that. But Glassdoor is usually like a very good resource to even be able to get something that's a bit more accurate.
Range. Fact.
Yep.
Correct. Correct.
Yep. Um, yeah, and I'm not sure if I'm saying your name correctly, but if I'm not, please forgive me. uh, Says it's so hard to get jobs in big tech. Yep, you can say that again. You can definitely
Yeah,
say
it
that
is.
again.
Yeah, I mean, yes, it is, no doubt. But it's, I mean, it's not impossible, right? It's just like and the thing is, there's also like another route, right? So starting out in a smaller or like a medium-sized company is not the worst thing, right? So you start out there, and then you eventually find a way to, get into the bigger ones. In fact, you could even start out in a smaller tech or smaller scale size company, and then or a mid-sized one, and you said that you didn't want to work in a big one anyway. So there are different routes, I think, to take.
So I know we're getting closer to the end of it. If you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We'll be more than happy to take them. I guess that's what this PSA is for. So if you have any strategy and ops questions, please let us know. I do have one more question of my own. So you know, what's the one thing that you hope people don't copy? Whether it's like breaking into tech or strategy and ops. One thing that's a bad advice.
Bad advice. That's a good question. Um, I think it's believing you have. So is it so is this let me clarify this. So is it before you get in or when you are in?
Both. Maybe you can answer both.
Both. Okay.
Mm.
Before you get in, I think bad advice is not having or not spending time. So it's two things, right? So one is your resume, right? And I'll
Mm.
just say this, right? So your resume, what I always advise is, I think having a multiple page CV, right? It's not a bad advice, but it's not the best advice, right? So what I always lean more towards is having a very short and concise CV, right? Preferably one page, right? And always having, so in all your bullet points and everything, right? Always having your results first, right? So what was the result of what you achieved, right? What's the result, and then what did you do?
Mm.
For example, help to grow revenue by X% by doing X, Y, Z as measured by X, right? That's the first part. Second part is going into the interviews without having all your stories rehearsed,
Mm.
structured, in the, I'm sure you've heard about the STYLE framework, right? So situation, task, action, result, and learning, right? So things so important because the person interviewing you is most likely taking notes, right? So you're making the work easier for them by breaking down your responses in that format, right? So this was the context, right? So what I was working on. This was a task I was asked to do. So the actions that I actually took, this was what the results, and this is what I learned from it. Easy peasy. You have just helped that person do their job, and you've made them follow that story. There are two things before. Now, when you're in, I think the biggest mistake you can make is thinking you can do it all by yourself.
Mm,
Thinking you know everything, right? I think that's really it's just a way to set yourself up for failure. I think you have to be ready to be very collaborative, right?
mm,
Um, Ask questions, um, ask a lot of questions, ask people for help. You
mm,
know, most of the answers um, for different things that you are, different problems that you're facing at the time, someone else will have done something that's similar, right? But if you don't ask,
mm.
if you don't reach out, if you don't try to connect with other people in that company, you would get lost and easily frustrated. So thinking you can do it alone is a huge mistake. So always be very open to collaborate, ask for help. Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah, teamwork make the dream work.
Facts.
So, before we wrap it up, Chima, first of all, been a great pleasure having this conversation. But I did want
Likewise.
to ask if you had, anything you want to shout, anything you want to promote, or just any last piece of advice that you think, people can really take away and think about, as they think about, building their own careers in tech.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the key thing is I think I mentioned that earlier is just be very open to change, and just try to embody that growth mindset, right? Because you need it. The way things are going now in tech and even in other sectors, right? So things are changing really fast. So you have to keep on learning and relearning, right? If it's a new skill, right? And you don't have to go to school to learn these things. It could be just picking up a book, right? So just having that growth mindset, being very eager to learn, to grow, right? To try hands out on new things, right? Super crucial, super critical, more now than ever before, right? And just because of the nature of the world that we're in now, the macroeconomic landscape, the tech landscape, right? Things are changing really fast. So having that mindset to always keep learning, keep growing is super helpful right now. I think it's more important than any other skill that you can have right now, I think.
And something that I found funny, this is a nice probably segue, but also potentially a good way to close it. A bit of a rant.
Mm,
So yesterday I was scrolling Twitter and then I found this video where this lady, interesting lady, was talking about time being a construct, right? And she went on this speech where she was talking about time isn't real. Oh no, not that time isn't real. That only 12 to 9 and time is real. That 10 and 11 is made up, and somehow 12 is real, but 9 isn't. And our whole basis wasn't even science. It's that, if you think about spiritual people, that's why like fasting times are like 369, just a bunch of made up conspiracy theory. And this thing went viral. And I think it goes in line with much of the stuff that, you tend to see online now. There's so much information out there right now that
Yeah.
information itself is boring.
Yep.
But if you come out and say some wild, out of hand stuff, it catches people's attention
It does.
because it breaks through the noise, it breaks the norm.
Hmm.
In fact, I think the closest thing I can compare it to, because I was watching another video earlier in the week as well that was talking about like YouTube and thumbnail strategy.
Yeah.
So pre 2020, 2021, the Mr. Beast style was the crazy thing. Multiple colors on the screen,
Mm.
mouth wide open, eyes glaring.
Yeah.
That's what works.
Yeah.
Do not have an oversaturation of that now. That a simple thumbnail
Yes.
now wins because in the sea of all this color and craziness, just having something that feels natural and real draws people in. I say all that to say anyone who's looking to break into tech or build a career in tech has to rewire their mind to do what everybody else doesn't want to do.
Yep.
See, the social media brain rot is real. Like you could sit
Yo,
there, we've all done it, right?
yo.
Scroll and laugh and laugh and but
Doom scrolling, yo.
that's the matrix. You gotta break away from the matrix. You have to invest in your own, and I think that's where that um growth mindset that you said, but also intentionality comes into play. Like, I'm going to take 10 minutes every day to learn something new. I'm going to watch a video.
Yeah.
I'm going to go watch the boring stuff. See, I know someone was asking earlier, like, if I play video games, I know this is not exciting
Yeah.
in the same way that watching, me do like those long shots, look on, but
Headshots and stuff.
headshots, but that's the difference. The things that are going to lead to an exciting life is not going to be exciting in the moment.
No.
It's funny how life works, right? Like you can either do like super exciting things in the moment
Yeah.
that don't add up or lead to anything, or you
Yeah.
could do the super boring
Boring
things
stuff, but
that leads to the 10x
exponential growth.
things. Yep.
100%, bro. 100%. I mean, like, well said. Well said. And it's true. Like, it's how, like, you need to invest that time, in the very boring stuff. And it's, to your point, it's like it's compounding, right? So you put in, even it's 1 hour every day, right? It adds up. It adds up. So yeah,
And another thing that I've also seen is how it probably doesn't look like much at first, right? But when like you said, it adds up when you show up at the right moment. So, for example, you're trying to break into tech, and it's like, oh, it's hard to get the jobs. Nothing is clicking. I'm coming from the outside looking in. But understand that you don't have to beat everybody. You only have to beat your competition. So, for example, if you're an Uber driver today
yeah.
and you're trying to break into tech, your
Mhm.
competition isn't Chima, right?
No.
He's gone.
Yeah.
Your competition is other Uber drivers who are trying to break into tech. And if you can beat that competition,
Yeah.
then you win.
Yeah.
And this is something I had to learn myself, is that sometimes we compare ourselves to people who are not even on our level.
Yeah.
So a lot of the time the battle looks like we can't win it.
Mhm.
But it's like among other people that are on your level, that work in a factory, that work in McDonald's, that work in all these other places, do they look at you crazy like, oh my God, this guy's so smart. How do you know all these things?
Yeah.
Are you the FBI? So that's the thing.
Yeah.
It's like you just have to be better than yesterday's version of yourself, be better than the
That's
people in
it.
the same
That's
situation
it.
as you. And that's how, because when, for example, if I'm a hiring leader and you tell me that that's where you're coming from, I'm going to look at you with that lens. It's like, oh my
Yep.
God, you came from that space and
Yeah.
you've been able to do X, Y,
On
Z.
this. Yeah.
If I give you this opportunity,
I
I
know
can
you
imagine
would.
what you can do.
Yeah, you knock it out of the park. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I agree.
So really good spot for us to land it tonight. Really, really grateful to you, bro, for dropping
No,
in and
thank you.
dropping
Thank
all
you.
those gems, all the nuggets, and how to be a more strategic thinker and how to even go into strategy and ops if that's what you're so pleased. Working in Tech comes at you every week on a Thursday evening. Big shout out to Chima. It's literally past midnight where he's at right now, but he showed up
Thanks for having me, man.
and
I
killed it. So
definitely enjoyed this. Thanks for
yeah,
having me.
absolutely, absolutely. We'll catch you again next week with a different guest and a different episode. Till then, keep working, keep putting in work. We're all gonna make it. See you.